Every week, we hear the same sentence. I think $1 million should be enough. Maybe, but only if you understand what retirement really pays you. Today, we're going to break down a real couple retiring at 65 using reduced Social Security, real Medicare premiums, and real taxes. No fear, no hype, just the math. This is Wealth Strategy by ArcVest. I am Eric Cooper, joined by Chad Fargason. Chad, how are you today, sir?
Eric, doing well, thanks. Enjoying sunny Houston here on a beautiful January afternoon.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time. I wanted the mathematician on the pod today to
Ah,
walk us through the retirement math. So what we hear is like, what is an aspirational retirement? For our probably whole lives, it's like $1 million. You sound rich. So what is $1 million? Inflation has kind of like made that number not as wealthy as you once sounded, but $1 million is still a lot of money. What percentage of the population has $1 million in retirement accounts, Chad? Do you know? I think we try to work on this.
yeah, I think we found that about 5% of the U.S. population at age 65 has a million dollars or more in a retirement account. Now, we're not including the wealth in your home because most people are going to expect that they're going to actually live in their home. So you're gonna live in your home. We're setting that home equity aside, and we're looking just at folks that have $1 million. That's about 5% of America. So if you've got
Yeah.
that million, congratulations, you're doing better than 95% of the American population.
It is no small feat to work a lifetime and accumulate $1 million for your retirement. So I echo Chad. Congratulations. That's awesome. Again, leaving home equity aside, I know often people's homes are their biggest assets. And we'll do a whole other episode on reverse mortgages and how to, monetize, built-in home equity. But for today, we're going to walk through $1 million and we're going to walk through some of these assumptions. So this may not exactly apply to you, but will be directionally appropriate. So we're going to say a married couple, both retire at age 65, $1
Mhm,
million invested, excluding home equity. We're going to
mhm.
say there's no pensions because defined benefits have gone away. It's all defined contribution, it seems, these days. Uh, we're going to say portfolio withdrawals assumed pre-tax. Uh, we were filing jointly. We are using a reduced Social Security at 65 because we didn't get to full retirement age. Because our thought is you should retire a little younger to enjoy your money. So this is why we're using these assumptions. And then we're going to use the current Medicare premiums and tax brackets. And then we're going to ignore the state income taxes. So those are all of our assumptions. We're going to walk through this math slowly. It'll be a little tedious, but a lot of people have not sat down with a financial planner, retirement expert. So we thought this would be a good way to just give a realistic assessment of what the math really looks like. So let's start with portfolio income. Chad, we are assuming
Mhm.
a 4% rule. What is a 4% rule on $1 million? What does that even mean?
Well, we talk about the 4% rule, which is to say, if I have $1 million, I simply multiply that by 4% and come up with $40,000. And that would be the amount from my portfolio that I should be able to spend every year across the entirety of my retirement. So I'd get $40,000 a year. That would be, divide that by 12, $3,300 a month. And the expectation is if you use this 4% rule, you can spend that amount adjusted up for inflation each year across the 30 years of retirement and have a very high expectation that you're not going to run out of money. So the 4% rule, we can spend a lot of time on this. We'll spend another pod going into detail, but that's what the 4% rule would be. It is that if you have $1 million, you can spend, you'll pull out $40,000 a year or $3,300 a month as income.
Okay, that's great. So this is what we're calling the portfolio paycheck. This is just what our portfolio is paying us. And then everything else, so security, if you have a side job, you want to be a course marshal official to make some income in
Mhm.
retirement, that's great. That will be on top of this 4% rule and this $40,000 a year. Our next assumption is our Social Security is at 65. So full
Mhm.
retirement age is 67, but we're saying 65, which means roughly a 14% reduction in the benefit. And this is permanent. Let's walk through that math. Per person, the full retirement age benefit is about $2,300 a month. Again,
Mhm.
reduced by about 13-14%. What does that get us to, and what does that look like for a couple, Chad?
So then that looks like you get down to you take that 2,300, you multiply it by 0.87. That's a 13% reduction, and we get to 2,000 a month per person. Of course, across two people, that's $4,000 a month for the couple, or $48,000 a year. So, and just a note, this is not the maximum benefit. This is kind of a middle of the road estimate for a couple that is both 65 and choosing to retire at that point. So when we put that together, we get $40,000 a year paycheck, if you will, from the portfolio, plus a $48,000 a year paycheck from Social Security. That's $88,000 a year in gross income. And that's gross income that should expect to increase according to inflation each year. So we can call that real gross income if you think about this in terms of, is that inflation adjusted or not? Over the years, that'll be inflation adjusted. We're just going to focus, of course, on this 1 year. So that's $88,000 of total gross income. Now that's before any federal taxes and before things like Medicare payments, which we'll talk about some more here.
Okay, that's great. $88,000 a year for a couple retired at 65. If I don't know what the median income in America is, I haven't looked it up recently, but it's somewhere in the $55,000, $60,000. So if you've got a portfolio and Social Security, you're doing much better than average, right?
I actually don't know median income off the top of my head either. It would seem like you're probably doing something. Household median, I believe, is somewhere close to this number. So I think this seems like you'd be retiring and you'd be sort of achieving like household median income, which seems like a really good outcome.
Yeah, I think so. So let's talk about Medicare premiums. These are automatic deductions. Let's say at 65, both spouses enroll in Medicare. Medicare Part B, the standard premium, is about $203 per person, right? So that reduces, that's $406 per month. So that's $406 for the couple. So your total premium for the year is $4,872. This is taken directly out of Social Security. You never touch this money. So you have to take that account. So we've anchored to that 88,000. It just got reduced pretty quickly, right? So we got to factor this in. We're also not yet including Medicare, Medigap, or Part D. Many couples spend another $2,000 to $4,000 more per year here. So that starts getting steep, right? So what should I be thinking about next? So I get all these other premiums. I thought I had $88,000. I'm getting reductions quickly. Where am I now, Chad?
Well, let's take the $88,000. Let's just take out that Medicare, that required payment. So we're saying that's on the order of $5,300 a year. And then we have to pay taxes, right? It kind of sucks. You're retiring. You think to yourself, man, I've been paying taxes my whole life. Nonetheless, we still have to pay taxes. And so we're assuming right now that what's happened over your lifetime is you've put that money into your IRA, you put that money into your 401k, and that's all been, a tax benefit, if you will, for you, i.e. it has been pre-tax money you've put away. It has grown. Unfortunately, now the government's going to take their portion. So if we calculate that out, there will be some taxes that have to be paid. We've done a quick little simplified math here to do the math. Assuming you're married, filing jointly, it's going to be about $4,000 a year in taxes. What did we say? Actually, sorry, about $5,000 a year in taxes that you're going to pull out there. So as we take those together, right, $88,000 a year gross, take out about $5,000 in taxes, take out about $5,000 in Medicare, put that together, $78,000 a year in total after-tax income prior to then paying other things like Medigap or anything else that you might have to pay as kind of a required payment.
Okay, but that sounds reasonable. So the system takes its cut, that you're paying all their taxes, and as a couple retiring with $1 million with Social Security, you're now down to just south of $6,500 a month, or $77,000, almost $78,000 a year. This sounds like a pretty reasonable retirement, assuming my home expenses are just some taxes and maintenance, right? If you have a huge mortgage, we do not recommend going into retirement with a big mortgage. Again, we can do another episode on home equity, but that seems pretty reasonable, right?
It does. It does. And then, maybe we should talk about some of the things which will make this kind of move up or down, right? But I think folks who have socked away $1 million and apply the 4% rule can feel pretty good, right? You're sitting at, as we just talked about, this $6,500 a month. And ideally, that's in a world in which your housing expenses are relatively low. And this really then becomes your money that you're spending, which is relatively discretionary, right? It's this money you have to spend on, your basic living expenses, and then anything you want to do with respect to travel or other things that you might want to do over retirement. But now, Eric, let's talk about a couple of things which we talk about with folks a lot, which is they say, well, why the 4% rule? And we don't have to get into that in detail now, but let's just hit for a second. What's the flex here? What if we went to a 5% or 6%? Could we take out more of the portfolio, and what would the puts and takes be?
Yeah,
And
you
so maybe I'll
definitely
just,
could. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead. Expand
I
on
would
that.
say maybe
What
I'll just
could
hit
I
on
do
this.
5%? Yeah, yeah.
Right. If we just went to the 5% rule, right? If we say it's not 4%, it's 5%, what does that mean? That means I take my $1 million portfolio, multiply by 5%. And so now I'm going to take out 50,000 a year as my portfolio paycheck instead of 40,000. That's 10,000 extra dollars. That would then get, well, it gets taxed. And now we're getting, that's going to be right at the marginal tax rate, which is for most people probably going to be something like the 22% rate there. So we're going to say for round figures, that's $8,000 extra a year that you get to take home. So that's pretty good, right? You're moving from your 78,000, you're going up to 86,000 a year. That's the difference in that 4 or that 5%, right? So that feels pretty good. It's not, it doesn't change everything, but it's a really nice extra 8,000 a year. The downside, the 5%, there are historical times when if you started with that 5% rule and you use that for the entirety of your retirement, somewhere within 30 years, you would actually run out of money. That's kind of the downside here, right? So that rule, the 4% rule, was set so that you would not run out of money over 30 years using historical U.S. averages. For example, if you retired in 1966 and used the 5% rule, somewhere in the late 80s or early 90s, you would have actually run out of your portfolio. Now, you still would have had Social Security, you still would have had money coming in from Social Security, but you would no longer have had an investment portfolio to lean back on as extra supplemental income.
That's right. And I think what we find with retirees and clients is people don't have to strictly adhere to the 4% rule. Again, this is a guideline. Maybe one year you take 6, but the next year you didn't you didn't have to buy a new car that year or whatever you did. You take 1 or 2. So it's reasonable to adjust up and down from kind of this theoretical 4% to meet the needs. My gosh, the portfolio grew 12% last year because, yeah, I'm a little older, but I've been a risky investor. Sure, maybe you can take a little bit more. But again, these things, the big caveats are state income tax, we didn't talk about. Dental vision, we didn't talk about. A big scary one, long-term care, we did not talk about. We know that can drain a portfolio quickly. So maybe thinking about long-term care insurance, which could be another drag on this. Inflation, it's very topical. I don't think we need to hit that. And then market volatility, we don't know. So yes, people think of market volatility as only going down. Market volatility also means you're doing quite well. There's a year that markets are ripping higher and you're, can maybe increase spending the next year on your 4% rule. So these are all just things we want to, put in a framing, but lay out this basic idea of if you got $1 million, this is what a retirement looks like. And congratulations for getting there. But this is not the super luxurious lifestyles of the rich and famous Robin Leach that we thought of as kids growing up, right? So you probably need a little bit more than $1 million, but this does buy a margin of safety, some flexibility, and probably reasonable income over time if you respect the math. So Chad, do you have any other things to leave our audience with on this $1 million portfolio?
I guess I would just leave us with this thought, Eric, is, people have the question, right? If I have this $1 million, exactly what do I do with it, right? And if you've got that question, call us, right? Come to us. We can show you exactly how to invest it in the most efficient, effective, lowest cost way to get the highest maximum return. So if you want the greatest return for the least amount of cost and the least level of risk, that's what we're here for, right? And we're happy to talk with you about that. So I would just, leave our audience with you. If you've got questions, give us a call. We're happy to talk.
All right. Thanks for that, Chad. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.